And welcome to North Central Journal. Today, my pleasure to welcome Barbara Foster, the host of Barbara and You, for 45 years. Not just recently, but for 45 years. So today, we're going to spend our time with Barbara Foster, looking back at your career and looking ahead at your career. And this is Barbara and Me.
Well, thanks, Scott. I'm glad to be here. And it's always easy for me to remember how old my show is, how long I've been doing it, because it was in May when my youngest daughter, was just 1 year old when I started doing this show.
Wow. Well, we've got half an hour here and a lot of ground to cover. And let's begin with your arrival in Pittsburgh from Cincinnati, Ohio. How do you go from Cincinnati to Pittsburgh?
Do you know my one-line answer that sometimes gets a laugh is I met my ex-husband in Chicago. He told me he was from Pittsburgh, and I thought he said Pittsburgh. But that's not true. I just made that up. And some of the locals don't like it when I say that. But it's true. I did meet my ex-husband in Chicago. We were both at a trade show for the Merck Chemical Company. I was doing some modeling for them. He was a salesman for them. And he was a really good salesman. I married him 3 months later. Took on his 4 children because he had been widowed. And so his 4 children were 3, 10, 11, and 12. And I had 2 older children from my first marriage back in Ohio that ended in divorce. And we were going to take a trip out west. And I'm like, oh, I won the use of a big Winnebago on a radio station. And he was saying, let's take all the kids and go out west. He had a sister in Arizona. And I thought, oh, we can't go on a vacation with all these kids and not be married. So we got married 3 months after we met.
And then did you go on vacation?
Oh, yes, we did. We did take the vacation. Oh, yeah, that's another long story that we won't even go into. But as life turns out, things don't always turn out the way you plan. And so I raised the kids and we separated. And I did go all the way back to my maiden name, which is Foster. And I worked for Foster Healy Real Estate, so I told Rick Healy I couldn't work for anybody else.
Now, Barbara and You isn't your first television experience. You actually were on a game show, as I recall.
That's true. You're one of the few people that remember or know that. And that just came about because I was in New York City. My husband was working, and I was killing time during the day. And I thought, Goodman and Todson. I think I always get it mixed up. It was Todson and Goodman. Anyway, the producers of To Tell the Truth, they did a lot of game shows. And I just went into their office and said, what do you have to do to get on this game show? And they handed me a clipboard and said, fill out this questionnaire and then go home and thank you, we'll call you if we need you. Well, the first call I got for them was for a female judge on a boxing match. Now, I knew nothing about boxing. Now, when I filled out the questionnaire, having 5 sons, I knew a lot about different sports. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't a good time for me to go when I got that first phone call, but I was devastated to tell them no, I couldn't make it. And I thought, I'll never get another chance at this. And a few weeks later, they called me and wanted me to pose as the imposter for a female basketball coach of the All-American Redheads. And at that time, they were the only professional women's basketball team. I guess they played the Harlem Globetrotters. I don't know where their games were, but they were the only one at that time. And the real person, she was the same height as me, 5'4", a little shorter now, but anyway, 5'4". And then the other imposter was very tall, and she was a model in New York. And of course, people may not know, there is a new version of To Tell the Truth now that's out, but it's quite a bit different. It's a little more risque than the one I was on. But of the 4 panelists, it was Peggy Cass, Bill Cullen, Kitty Carlisle, and Alan Alda. So I got to meet Alan Alda, which was a big thrill. But it was Peggy Cass and Bill Cullen who voted for me because I was such a good liar. I convinced them might be the real person. And it was a great experience. And then when I got back to Fitchburg, word got out that I had done that, and when the show was going to air. And I got a call from Pat Gogan, who I'm sure you remember as a reporter with the Sentinel.
Yep.
And she wanted to interview me about the experience. And when she did, it came out in the newspaper article that I had had some modeling experience at Cincinnati, and I'm too short to do runway modeling, but I am somewhat photogenic. So I had a lot of photo shoots with, and I have good hair. I worked for a lot of the hair companies and all that. But that when that came out in the story that I had experienced doing commercial work in Cincinnati as a model, Ron Hammaker was the general manager of what was it called then? It wasn't even Adams Russell then. I think it might have been Cablevision. I'm not sure what the first one was.
Montechusett Cable?
That's it. Yes, thank you. Yep. Yeah, you were right across the street at the radio. I did some research, you know. Yeah, well, you were across the street at the radio station back in those days, because I remember you and Dave Svens covering my boys in their sports.
That's right. Yep.
And one of you, I think it was Dave Svens, always referred to my son Sean, who was a really good football player, but also played basketball, but he always called him Lanky. And my son to this day doesn't like to be called Lanky. But so anyway, Ron Hammaker said, yeah, how would you like to start a programming department and be our first local show? And back in the old days, you and I mentioned this earlier, back in the old days, I used to get paid. But the cable company kept changing hands. And finally, AT&T was the owner, and we had a really good local programming department going on by then. John McNamara was there, and a lot of activity going on, but they decided to cancel all local programming. And they didn't, I think they were only owners of the company for less than a year. But when they canceled it, I thought, okay, it's been a good run. I won't complain about this. And at the same time, I got called from Fitchburg Access TV, Leominster Access TV, and Lunenburg. And I interviewed with all three of them and chose Fitchburg because at that time, Fitchburg had the best studio, the best equipment, the best staff.
The best people, yes. Yeah.
Definitely the best people. But Paul, what was his last name? But the general manager back when I started.
I don't remember.
Okay, thank you.
Paul Whelan.
Paul Whelan. Yeah. Okay, I had the first name.
There you go.
We got to work together here, Scott. But I met with him, and we made an agreement that as long as I would be allowed to play my show in other cities and towns in the area, and the FATV would provide me with a crew, which thankfully they've done. I love being here. I am so thankful. I made the right choice, and I know it, and I love being a part of FATV.
Now, Montechusett Cable, the original studios were on Water Street. When you came to FATV, were they here, or were they?
No, it definitely wasn't here.
Yeah.
But I'm trying to remember where
the South Street School, was it?
I did work in the South. It might have been at that time. I think that might have been the first one. Mm-hmm. But yeah, we've moved a couple times. And I like this location where we are now on Kimball Street.
What drew you to, you said you had three opportunities, Leominster Access, Lunenburg, and Fitchburg. What really made you land on the Fitchburg decision?
Well, I was living in Fitchburg at the time.
Uh-huh.
I raised my kids here, and it was convenient. But like I said, I was very impressed with the quality of the programming they were already doing, and the equipment they had, the staff they had, and the deal Paul and I made, which had many changes. You were general manager for, what, how many years were you general manager?
Here, 3 years, yeah.
3 years, yeah. Okay. So with each change in management, they kept me on, and I'm grateful for that.
Now, you mentioned you lived in Fitchburg, you had children, you were a real estate agent. How did you find time to balance all of this, including a television show?
Well, I'm still trying to balance it, Scott. But it's interesting because in the early days, I would have to I'd have to hustle to find people to have on my show.
Sure.
And I tried to have 2 guests and 1 musical performer for the break between guests. And I think we just the music side just kind of faded away. But oh, who was the popular singer? Johnny Gerard, I think his name was, around town.
Yeah.
Played guitar and sang in a lot of, very popular.
Yeah.
And the first time he was on TV with me, he started strumming his guitar. He looked at the monitor, he said, oh my God, I'm on television. But you know, I like having the real informal atmosphere. But get back to your question about balancing time. I've just always been kind of an energetic person, and I oftentimes overbook myself and have a busy day where the night before I'm thinking, why did I schedule all that? But people have asked me over the years, haven't you ever run out of guests? And I can honestly say, no, never once did I feel panicky that I'm not going to be able to get a guest for this show, because there are a lot of talented people that don't get the recognition they deserve or wouldn't think of themselves coming on TV, but I encourage them a little bit. And so now, after 45 years, we're at the point where people call me. I don't have to reach out anymore, and we're doing this on a May afternoon, and I'm booked through July.
Wow.
So, and it's only once a week.
It's once a week,
but,
yeah.
But I love doing it.
Well,
I ask a lot of questions.
And my question to you is why? Why did you want to do this? And for 45 years, did you ever have an idea that you
no.
that you'd be still in the game?
It's lasted longer than any of my marriages. But no, I can say there were days where, especially when I was starting over as a single woman in real estate, and there were days that I'd be on the road working 7 in the morning till 7 at night,
yeah.
And I'd think, oh, the last thing I want to do is go do my TV show tonight.
Yeah.
But I've never once walked out of this building or any TV studio disappointed that I did it. I'm always glad. It's like an adrenaline rush for me. But I can remember in the beginning days, I kind of felt like somebody was going to discover that I had not been trained to do this. And I would think, looking over my shoulder, they're gonna find out I don't belong here. But I just kept doing it. And some people will say to me, oh, you're so lucky. You just fall into different things. And first of all, I never say lucky, I say blessed. But I'm not afraid to make myself vulnerable. And I think too many people, whatever their goals are, whatever they would like to do, what their dreams are, they just assume it's going to be too difficult, so they never try. And if you don't try, you definitely aren't going to get there.
One of the things that in my career as a broadcaster, and then in access television, and also the years I spent in corporate television, the changes in technology over that period of time, for me it was 45 years actually, similar to your career. You've seen a ton of changes in the way we do things, the way you do things and have to approach it. What about 2020 and a pandemic? What changed in your production? What were the challenges that you had to face doing your show during this pandemic?
Well, we all know so many things changed in everybody's life. But I had done my last live show on March 10th, and then the pandemic started. And they ran, Ann Bisbee and Nate Glennie, they ran repeats of my show every Tuesday up until May. And by this time, Nate had convinced me that I could do interviews on Zoom. I am so much a non-technical person. If you had told me 5 years ago that I was going to be doing the show from my kitchen through my computer, I would have said, not me. But Nate was very persistent, and he convinced me we can do this. So I think my first Zoom show was May 5th. And we've been Zooming ever since, and I'm happy that I'm happy to be back in the studio just to see you and to see everybody today. But on June 8th, we're going to go back to doing shows in the studio. Uh-huh. The good thing about the Zoom interviews is that you can interview anybody anywhere. The first Zoom show we did, in addition to Mayor DiNatale, that we were talking about the census, we had the executive vice president in New York City of the United States Census Bureau on with the mayor. You can't do that when you got to be in the studio. So it really opened up a whole new venue.
Will you continue to use Zoom as part of your programming if, for example, you want to interview someone outside of Pittsburgh?
Yes, yeah. I would think so. Robin Homo, my current director, who does a wonderful job, she says we can do it if we need to. And as you know, over the years, I've interviewed a lot of celebrities, and so now I can approach people like that, or even if it's a good friend of mine. Or my last Christmas show, I ended up doing 2 one-hour shows with my family and was able to interview my family in Colorado, California, Indiana, and Ohio, along with the locals. So there may be programs, but routinely we will plan on being here in the studio.
You mentioned your family, and that's one of the questions I wanted to ask. Having done this for 45 years, you had children, now you have grandchildren, even great-grandchildren. What role has your family played in your career?
Well, of the 7 children I raised, there were 5 older ones and 2 younger ones. So the 2 younger ones got used to going to the TV studio with me on Tuesday nights back on Water Street. And they actually learned to run a TV camera at maybe age 10. But first of all, let me tell you that my family really isn't impressed at all. You know that. You kids that would hear you on the radio.
I know how it is.
So what, Dad? You're my dad. It's not a big deal. So my kids are not overly impressed with what I do. But everybody did really enjoy when we were able to put that Christmas program and get the whole family. I sent an email out to all, because when we're all together with significant others and in-laws and the whole family, there's 29 of us. Wow. So I sent out an email not thinking that everybody would want to be part of my Christmas show, and they all wanted to be. So we ended up with, like, everybody got an 8-minute, the family got an 8-minute interview, each family. But so there's pros and cons to both. And to get back to your original question, yes, if the occasion arose that was the only way I was going to get an interview with a certain person, we would Zoom.
So what has been the motivation over the years to keep it going?
What could I say? I could say pride. I could say greed. but
you don't get paid
anymore.
So.
No, I love meeting people. And I feel I did this with my writing, which I do still publish some freelance writing. And when I can write an article about someone or interview someone who I think is deserving of some recognition, and but a lot of people don't know what they do and how deserving they are. I love to be able to shine the spotlight on people like that. And for whatever reason, whether it's a God-given gift or for whatever reason, I'm usually pretty good at getting information out of people. I was visiting with my son and his wife in Indiana, and we're all very, very close, but my daughter-in-law's brother and sister were there with the brother-in-law, anyway, my daughter-in-law could not believe it because she didn't know that her brother-in-law was writing a book. But I found that out. She's never gotten her sister to sing in front of her. I had her sister singing in the living room. I have a knack for pulling things out of people, I guess.
Well, you've interviewed a number of celebrities over the years, and we're going to talk about some of those. But I want to ask you a specific question. Who was your favorite?
Well, whenever people look at my long list,
yes,
everybody's most impressed with Johnny Cash. George Plimpton was a big conquering to get him to agree to an interview. And I don't remember if I've told you that story before. I guess I would still say Johnny Cash was probably of the celebrities. But the everyday people are just as important as the celebrities.
Who was the most difficult interview? Was it George Plimpton?
Well, getting the interview was very difficult, and I was very persistent. I'll try to make it short. I talked to him on the phone a couple of times. He was staying at the Holiday Inn. I was down the street at the TV studio. But he was going to the Wallace Civic Center every day to practice with the Bruins. That's why he was in town. I got him on the phone a couple of times. He didn't say yes. He didn't say no. He was very evasive. And I didn't give up. So I knew what time he was supposed to arrive at the Civic Center, and I parked myself inside the door. And when he came in, he glanced down at me, a very tall man, walked with a long stride, glanced at me, said hello, maybe, and I said, hi, I'm Barbara. We talked on the phone. And blah, blah, blah. Now, my feet are going very quickly to keep up with him, and my mouth is going faster than my feet. And now he's walking down the stairs to go in the locker room when I shouted at him, remember how you felt when you wanted to play football with the Detroit Lions and they wouldn't let you? He looked at me and said, where do you want me and when? But the minute he came in the studio, he oozed charm. And as a matter of fact, we had a very good interview, and he came back to town maybe 4 years later to speak at some social event, and I contacted him and said, you probably don't remember me, but he said, oh, I remember you. You almost went into the locker room with me. And back in those days, women did not go in locker rooms.
Yeah.
So he was a challenge. Dr. Hook and the Medicine Show. They were performed at the Civic Center. They were quite a challenge. One of their guys got me up and had me dancing with him during the interview. Merle Haggard told me quite a few things I didn't know about him. And so, you know, everybody's different. And as an interviewer, and you know this, it's so important to listen to the answers. Because sometimes if you make a list of the questions you're going to ask and you're married to that list, you may miss some really good information.
Right.
So they're all a learning experience.
Now, you're talking about the Civic Center, and a lot of folks probably don't remember that it was quite a venue for performances back in the 70s. The Bruins did train there for a few years. That was their training facility. But you interviewed Karen and Richard Carpenter. I remember seeing them perform at the Civic Center, but tell me about that interview with the Carpenters.
Well, they had their very nice motorhome. I went into their motorhome, and actually, that was not on video. I wrote an article about it, but we didn't. They would not allow any photographs taken or video, and they were both very friendly. But she was adamant, and she was going through her anorexia, and she didn't want to be photographed. But the other one that was really challenging was, and I think those concerts went into the 80s as well as the 70s, because if a star is touring New England and they don't have something booked, they'd rather go to a small venue like our Civic Center than skip a night of income. But the one that was a real challenge was Fats Domino and Jerry Lee Lewis, who were on the same show. They were sharing the time. And I had done my homework ahead of time. I contacted their manager and I went through all the channels, and I was told emphatically that they would not do any interviews, period. The day of the concert, I called it was a Marriott in Worcester at the time. And you know celebrities don't register under their own name. I called and asked for Jerry Lee Lewis, and he answered his phone. And I told him who I was and what I wanted. He said, well, sure, darling, you come on backstage. Hung up, and I thought, well, let's try that again. Fats Domino answered his phone. This is unheard of. So in some cases, I guess I'm just lucky. And I remember my daughter was younger then, and she was the only one left at home. And she got a big kick out of Fats Domino with all of his rings. He had so many rings on. And then one other interview I happened to do at the Civic Center was when Michael Dukakis, I think he was governor at the time. I've interviewed him so many times. I started interviewing when his hair was all black. It's all gray now. But, and we'll never know what mine is. But anyway, he has such a talent for making you feel important, Michael Dukakis, when you're talking to him.
Yeah.
And you feel like you could sit there and interview him all afternoon, but there's somebody over here giving him the cut sign because he's got to get on to a new place. But he spoke to my daughter Jessica, and he was asking her about her teacher and about her homework, and she fell in love with him. And on the ride home, she's like, Mommy, can't you marry him? And I said, no, honey, he's got a wife. And I told Michael that story many years later when he was at our Chamber of Commerce, that I was once again interviewing him. And I told him that. He said, oh, well, don't tell that story to Kitty. And actually, the only time I met him with Kitty was a Boulder Award when Ellen DiGeronimo was getting the award because she worked with him.
Right.
But usually, being a politician, he was out and about.
Now, another celebrity, local celebrity that you've interviewed a few times and actually have created a friendship with is Hank Phillippe Ryan, who is, if for folks don't know, she was a personality on Boston television. She's an accomplished author. Tell us about that relationship and how it came to be and how it is today?
For the most part, and you know, I have that long list of celebrities. Most people are very, very nice, very approachable, and she's kind of at the top of my nice list. And I will tell you about the two who did not grant me interviews if we have time. But Hank Phillippe Ryan she was on Channel 7, and people remember her for Help Me Hank. When they had a problem, she would help them solve it. And the first time I interviewed her, we were chatting before or after, and she said, well, Barbara, I should interview you. And I'm thinking, you're big time. I'm small potatoes. But she said, no, I'd like to. I think that would be interesting. I'd like to interview you. So she was coming back for a Chamber of Commerce to speak at a Chamber of Commerce meeting. And she said she would stay after her speech. She would stay and interview me. And Dave Spence was actually, I think we ended up doing it at the Leominster Library. But anyway, Dave Spence was the camera person, and she was just delightful interviewing me. And I was so honored to have her interview me. And at that time, I don't know if she'd even started her writing career. But if I tell people, her and Liz Walker, if you ever have a chance to hear either one of them speak, they're both incredible motivational speakers. And I've heard Hank tell the stories that she grew up in Indiana, and her and her sister would ride their ponies to the library because they were such avid readers. And most successful writers, especially in fiction, are avid readers. But yes, she's got at least her 8th novel is out now. Mm-hmm. I have to say I've stopped reading them because she is such a good mystery writer that they scare the heck out of me. But if you like mysteries, she's fabulous. Oh, and then if you want me to, I'll quickly say 2 people that I was supposed to interview at the Civic Center and had everything lined up ahead of time, had a crew there, and they sent somebody out to tell me they couldn't do the interview. One was Martin Mull, who really isn't that big a deal. Yeah. And the other one was Helen Reddy, and her husband, I believe she's passed away now, but her husband came out to tell me that she wasn't able to do the interview.
Well, we're kind of winding down, but I want to ask you, what challenges lie ahead in post-pandemic America and post-pandemic television production? What challenges do you see that you may have to face coming up?
Well, that's a good question. And does anybody know?
No one really does know, no.
No one really knows. And it affects all areas of your life, your family life, the real estate life. I mean, right now the real estate market is booming like nobody ever believed it would. And as I said, my show's booked up through July, so it doesn't look like that's going to crash and burn. So I just kind of predict more of the same.
What keeps you going?
Well, God blessed me with high energy, and this, I guess, the adrenaline and this willingness to make myself vulnerable, just to try it and see if I can do it.
Well, as always, it is my distinct pleasure to be with you and to talk with you. We've done a few interviews together, both on either side of the fence, you interviewing me and me interviewing you. And I just want to congratulate you and tell you that it's a pleasure having known you for so many years, and how much we admire your chutzpah and your professionalism. And I know that the staff here at FATV always looks forward to Barbara and you.
Well, I do too, and I thank them for that support. I couldn't be at a better place than FATV.
Thank you very much, Barbara.
Thank you, Scott.